I am so incredibly excited and honored to introduce my next guest, Lindsay Huff. Lindsay is a peer supporter from the Indianapolis area, and she has been in the field for over 10 years. Lindsay gets incredibly vulnerable about her journey into recovery and ultimately how she's able to show up for other people today. I want to take this moment to dedicate this episode to Lindsay's late mother, Joanna, who recently passed away. Um, I'm just Lindsay's an incredible person, and I'm so excited to share this with you all. So, without further ado, here's the episode. All right, Lindsay. I appreciate you meeting with me this morning. I kind of want to give you this opportunity to share whatever you're comfortable with about your own story and what ultimately got you into peer support.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kyle. I'm so excited to be here. So, my journey began in 2015, not my recovery journey, my active use journey. When I was 13, my older brother overdosed and passed away. And from that point forward, it really was just about trying to understand what was happening in his life. I wanted to know why he made the decisions that he did. And at the same time, I was really struggling emotionally. And so I think the opportunity presented itself, and it started out with like marijuana, and marijuana moved to alcohol and party drugs like ecstasy and mushrooms. And then we made our way from cocaine to crack cocaine to heroin, IV heroin use, and then methamphetamine use. So throughout that progression, and we know that addiction is a progressive illness, and so throughout that progression, my behavior started to change. I became completely disconnected from who I was as a perfect person previously. So the people that I hung out with changed, the places that I frequented changed, and my behavior towards my family changed. I pushed a lot of people away. And so from there, as the progression like kept going, like a lot of things happened. My boyfriend, who I am married to today, we met in high school, and he was with me kind of through all of that. When I got into the IV heroin use stage here in Indianapolis, that was when things got really bad. It was the lying, cheating, stealing. I generally use that to just kind of encompass all of it because if you're in recovery, you know what goes with that. So we moved to Evansville, Indiana from Indianapolis because he was going to go to USI for college. And my mom at this point, who was like the one person that really never walked away from me, was like, Mike, will you take Lindsay with you to Evansville? Let's get her out of Indy, get her to a new place, a fresh start. And he was like, yes. So we packed everything up and we moved to Evansville. And we were living in his dorm room. He didn't have a roommate, and so we were just in the two twin beds in his dorm room, and he would go to school, and I was slowly trying to start rebuilding. Although I wasn't in any treatment programs, I was just away from the area that I was used to using in. So I ended up going to the methadone clinic in Evansville. And this was in 2010, 2011. I was 20 and 21, and the clinics were very, very different then. And it really was getting up every day to go get my dose to, again, not be sick, not be dope sick, which was the reason I had moved to Evansville. The dope sickness just prevented me from living any sort of progressive life. So I'm going to the clinic, I get a job, and I'm doing better. I have about 6 months of recovery at this point, and we bought a single wide trailer and we gutted that trailer and we made it our own, and it was our home, and we painted, and it was beautiful, and life was good for a little while. New place, new everything. I was working, he was going to school, and then one of the people that I worked with offered me methamphetamine, and I had never used meth before. Um, and even though it was a different drug, a different city, and different people, it was the exact same results and it happened quick. I used that meth for the first time and we were right back down the rabbit hole. And for about 30 days, I didn't eat, I didn't sleep, I stayed high. I ended up kicking my boyfriend out of our trailer and I let a guy that was cooking meth move in. It was the old life in a new way, but it was wild. So after losing the trailer, moving in with this guy into his mom's house, not talking to my family, not talking to my boyfriend, just complete disconnection. I ended up having a drug-induced seizure. And I don't remember much of what happened. I know that I started seizing, and somewhere between the start of the episode of the seizure and the end, um, I got to the hospital. They got me to the hospital, and by that point, my brain had been deprived of oxygen for such a large amount of time that they didn't know the state I was going to be in or if I would wake up. After being in a coma for a week, I did wake up. And when I woke up, it was my mom's face that I saw.
I I'm just kind of thinking, so your brother essentially you lost him to addiction and your parents um almost lost you to addiction in a lot of ways. What was that like losing your brother at 13 years old? Like how did you cope with that? How did your parents cope with that?
So I really think that there is no greater loss than the loss of a child. Um, I am moving through a loss right now, and it it's hard, but it is nothing compared, like there is no comparison to what I watched the grieving process be like for my parents. And it did completely change them. Now, in that process of watching them grieve, I was also grieving, but I think that we all grieve in different ways. And I was so young that I didn't know what to do with those big feelings. And they were going through what they were going through. And so it really was just like, I'm going to have to handle this how I know how.
Yeah, I think grief's a tricky thing because there's not like parameters with grief, right? I mean, people you just have to kind of go through it. Like someone once made this comparison to me that it's kind of like swimming out into the waves and like at first the waves are really really high and then like as you swim further and further out they're just less frequent but they're still there. I just thought that was a really good analogy. But so your parents are grieving, you kind of turn to drugs. It gets wild, you kind of just change one substance for another. um yeah, you were on methadone. What was that? I mean, you had to go to the methadone clinic every single day. Um, and you were able to use like meth on top of that, or did you kind of stop using the meth?
So the methadone clinics back then were really just that. Like you had to get up every single day and go to the clinic to get your dose. Now you could get take home doses, like you could work up to that, but it really was. It was just getting up it was a regular routine of going to the clinic. And you don't feel good about yourself when you're doing that. Like it is just a way for some people it's really helpful. Like I don't want to give like methadone is really great for some people. For me, it was just getting by, I think. Yeah. So the clinic was a stepping stone. I don't want to like ever like there are multiple pathways to recovery. So I will never ever put one down. But the methadone clinic was a stepping stone towards recovery. Even though I returned to use, it was a stepping stone.
Yeah, I my where I'm at, methadone clinics are you don't hear about them that much. I think there is one in like Minneapolis that you can go to, and they're talking about potentially doing something like that here in Wisconsin and our part. Um, so it's just interesting to me to kind of hear how that works. There's a lot of, Suboxone and those things are readily available, but the methadone is not as common. So it's just
Oh,
interesting.
for sure. So, when I woke up from my coma and I saw my mom's face, I was really confused for a little while. Like, I had no idea what had happened. I was angry, I was scared, and I always like encompass this as like all of the feelings that you feel in active addiction, like sadness, anger, frustration, feeling alone, scared, like all of those all at once was how I felt when I woke up. But the most prevalent was anger. Today, I know that anger is a secondary emotion. And so if I dig into that deeper for myself a little bit, it was fear and hurt. So I woke up, I ended up going to the rehabilitation hospital in Indianapolis. So I came back to Indiana, and that was because my brain was deprived of oxygen. So I had what was called an anoxic brain injury. And so there was just like relearning some things. And it really was just restructuring my cognitive. So from there, I moved in with my mom and I started going to a community mental health center on the south side of Indy called Adult and Child. And Adult and Child offered some very like the most basic but the most important services, I think. And that is that those were psychiatry, therapy, care coordination, and peer support. And so I didn't have a car. I didn't have a job. I was living with my mom. I was 22 years old and I was like, shit, no other options. Like, got to do something like this. I just knew I didn't know how to do it. I just knew something had to shift. And so I got up every day. I got a Medicaid cab and I went to Adult and Child, and they had like day programming where I could just hang out all day, and I would see an immense amount of people during the week. But my peer support professional was the one that hit home the most for me because she would come to my house, she would pick me up, she would take me to meetings, she would get me involved in the community. She taught me about not only what addiction is, but how she overcame it. And not overcame it, but how she maintained her own recovery for years. And there was just this immeasurable amount of connection that I felt of somebody understands me. And throughout everything up until that point, that was the big thing missing for me. I just felt like nobody understood me.
Yeah, it's amazing when you finally feel like you're heard and seen by somebody, like somebody that really gets it and doesn't, you know, push like an agenda necessarily and tell you you need to do this and you need to do that. Because let's face it, we all have had a lot of people doing that in our lives at some point. And so to have someone who just is there to walk beside you through some of that, um, what an amazing thing. Um, I don't want to speak for you, but I have a hunch that this relationship is what was maybe a catalyst for you to get into peer support yourself. Do I
It
remember that
was.
correctly?
It
Okay, can you
was.
talk a
Yeah.
little bit about that?
Absolutely. So she met with me weekly for a year, a solid year, no breaks, nothing, like meetings, community work, all of it. And after a year, she looked at me and she said, Lindsay, you could do what I do and you could be really good at it. And I was like, Psh, I'm not good at anything. And she was like, but I think you could be really good at this. And that was the turning point. Peer support was brand new in India at that time. It was brand new. This was 2014. She walked me through the process and helped me get certified. And started working in the field a year later.
That's awesome. And so you've been first of all in recovery for you just celebrated 8 years, not
11.
11. Wow. Well, congratulations. And you've basically been working in the field about the same amount of time, right? Is
For
that
10. You have to
for
have a
10?
year before you can get certified. Yeah.
Got it. So you've held several positions in the peer support field
So
in
when I first started in the field, it was 2015. The majority of my career has been community mental health centers. And so I started out in a small program in Cummins Behavioral Health in 2015. And I was there for 4 years. I got hired in at that job at $13 an hour. And so, but it was what I needed and I loved it. And so that was like the very first stepping stone of learning how to instill love that has always been given to me and to other people. And the beauty of giving back in that way is just, I couldn't ask for more.
amazing stuff. So you started and you've worked at a couple different few different organizations
Yeah.
and you're actually a trainer right now. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So this last year, I had a baby. My son is 6 months old, and so I'm going to back up. I went from Cummins to Volunteers of America. That was a great program because you could have, that was moms who could have their kids with them as they move through treatment. So I've worked for four different organizations within the Indianapolis community, and I became pregnant at the last organization. And when that happened, when I was like towards maternity leave, I was like, okay, something's got to shift. I really didn't feel valued at the previous position I was at, and I was like, I just have to do something different. Um, Being pregnant and working in the field was hard because any type of stress that you feel and any kind of type, like your baby feels your feelings, and so I had to really, really look into myself to decide what I wanted to do. So I went on maternity leave and I started reaching out and I reached out to everybody. I'd been working in the field for 10 years. And so I just hit up everybody I knew and I was like, look, like I'm looking for a new position. So that was when I reached out to somebody that I had known in the field for a long time that is the vice president of Mental Health of America. And he said that there was this new opportunity for trainers to be able to teach the trainings to get certified. And I was off the wall excited. So I went through that process and I got approved as a train the trainer this year. And I have been teaching the 5-day fundamentals training and the ethics training that you need to get certified.
It's awesome. Can you talk a little bit about what that process looks like for people?
Oh, for sure. So the certification process is just, like you need two trainings, the 5-day fundamentals and the ethics, and then an HIV course, and then you are certified as an associate here in Indiana. For me as the trainer to be able to sit in the room or on the computer with a group of 30 people and see the next generation of peer support fills me with so much excitement and gratitude for where we're moving because the field is booming and we're projecting forward.
It's amazing. And I'll check with you after this episode, but I'd love to include some information about, how one would maybe go about getting certified through that organization. So I'll definitely include that.
Okay.
You started to kind of talk about it, but can you share maybe your thoughts or what you see as barriers for people kind of breaking into the field or working in the field of peer support?
Yeah. So when you first get into the field, it's kind of like within organizations, there's not a lot of direction. And I can tell you what I think this equates to. And it's something that people aren't talking about. And I don't know why people aren't talking about it because it's really important. And I think the lack of direction stems from there being no upward movement for other peers. And while a care coordinator and a licensed clinical social worker roles are absolutely invaluable, and trust me when I say that, I believe it, they don't know what a peer does. And the majority of my career has been out in the community, and we're in the city, and so all sides of town, you don't really know what you're getting into. And if you don't have somebody to walk you through how to move about your day, moving through the city, moving through the resources available, moving through how to implement and help those you're working with to understand the education you're trying to provide, like only a peer can do that, in my
Yeah, I
opinion.
mean, I mean, we talked about this pretty extensively, and it seems to be a common theme for peers. Like, what is the next step? And I know I shared this with you, but for a lot of people, you know, the thought process is, well, go back to school, become a social worker, become a therapist. And it's like we're considered or there's this idea that we're supposed to be professionals, right? And so in my opinion, and obviously I'm biased, the peer is an invaluable asset to any um, disciplinary team. And so, but you're right. It's like finding, um, the what does that next step look like? Where do you go from there? So I totally I share that with you. I am equally as frustrated with that. And hopefully as the field grows, there will be more opportunities for folks because I just think that it's so important and we fill so many gaps, you know. Um, can you talk a little bit about what you see as maybe being the future of peer support?
Absolutely. So, ideally, what I see moving forward is supervisor positions available. Like if we want to start small, you start in the field, you get a certain amount of time under your belt, and then you move up. It's just like experience. You can't, there is life experience. There is no comparison for it. And I can tell you why. It's because everybody's story is different, and every single person's story has value. And so that experience of understanding that is the connection. So what does peer support look like? Well, it looks like that experience continuing to grow, but within organizations, not just grow, but continue to be valued. And that value is what is lacking, in my opinion.
Beautifully said. I like I, I agree with you. Can you maybe share a success story that you have seen while you've been practicing peer support, either in your own life or that of maybe someone you've worked with?
Oh, absolutely. So the number of people, so there's this thing that I really started recognizing happening probably about my third year of working into the field. And you sit with somebody, you sit in the mud with them, right? Like they come in and they're there for whatever reason, and you sit in the mud with them until they're ready and able to move. And when they move through the education and the feedback and the not guidance, but the putting the ball back in their court of this is your life and you get to do with it what you want, and here are all of the invaluable resources available to you, and get in my car and let's go do it together. At some point a light flips on in their eyes, and when that light flips on, there's no going back. It's only forward movement after that. So you sit in the mud until they're ready and able to move. Now, the number of people that I've worked with that the light flips on for, it's different for all of them, because sometimes the light flips on and it's like, okay, I want medication assisted treatment and I want to do therapy. And sometimes the light flips on and it's like, I want to get housing and I want to be financially stable. And sometimes the light flips on and it's like, I want to do what you're doing. And I think what I always go back to is, what is a self-directed life for you? And that acceptance of helping them find that.
Awesome stuff. I appreciate everything that you've shared today, and you just have so much insight, and obviously you've been doing this for quite a while. So I'm grateful that you were willing to meet with me, and I'm especially grateful that our paths crossed. And we've been able to connect, and I just really hope to stay in touch with you moving forward. I know we will. I do want to give you kind of this last opportunity, Lindsay. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
Yeah, there is. So the last thing that I want to share, and this is for everybody that's watching, my mom, who was the one guiding, she instilled everything in me that I get to pass forward today. She passed away on Monday, and after a solid 73 years of giving back to our community, she was a licensed clinical social worker. And from a young age, I remember learning about my emotions. And even though I had that one person in my court, not everybody does. So I want to not only thank her for helping me to live a self-directed life for myself and give back in all of the ways that I can, but I also want to instill in each of you watching this that you can be that guiding hope for each of your people. It doesn't have to be the love of a mom. It doesn't have to be a recovery coach. It doesn't have to be a sponsor. You can be the guiding light in anybody's life that you choose. And I share this today because that is the message that my mother instilled in me. And so I just want to thank her for being a part of my life and helping me get to this place today.
It's beautiful. Well, Lindsay, again, thank you so much for meeting with me. You have an amazing story and such a message, and I just know that you're going to do amazing things. So I look forward to, staying in touch with you and seeing where you go.
Thank you, Kyle. You're awesome.